Coming up in today's newscast, Israel may have changed its attitudes regarding the JCPOA Iranian nuclear deal. The Remedia baby formula scandal claims its fourth life, and Israeli company Sodastream makes a powerful statement in New York. After years of publicly pushing for the dissolving of the JCPOA Iranian nuclear deal, the United States under President Trump finally listened and pulled out. But now it appears that Israel may have a bit of buyer's remorse. According to Haaretz's report, a foreign ministry document detailing goals for the coming year says that, quote, efforts for 2019 should focus on pressuring for an improved agreement that will address the flaws of the old deal, end quote. This means essentially that Israel now supports the idea of negotiating a nuclear deal with Iran. It's a clear detachment from the old modus operandi in which the Israeli government has been focusing on fixing or nixing the deal, emphasis on nixing. In 2018, the goals included, quote, establishing red lines and preventing Iran from making effective progress in its nuclear program, first and foremost with regard to the nuclear agreement, end quote. Prime Minister Netanyahu also gave speeches to the United States Congress, to public, to the internet, and to President Trump specifically, calling to cancel the deal. Just a few months ago, there was even a big reveal of thousands of documents that Israel smuggled out of Iran. But now, instead of concerning itself solely with preventative methods against Iran, Israel will be looking to diversify those that Israel relies on, including strengthening ties with Russia. Iran, on the other hand, has made it clear that they aren't looking to renegotiate. In fact, despite the inner turmoil the country is currently experiencing, Iran has reportedly continued to uphold its part in the deal, while ratcheting up its rhetoric. An Iranian Atomic Energy Organization official told Remedia that, quote, we are at a considerably more advanced status than when we signed the deal. The country is moving ahead in nuclear activities at a favorable pace, and we will not return to previous levels if our counterparts leave the JCPOA, but will instead reach even more advanced levels, end quote. A new poll by Israel's Keshet TV reports that the Likud party, with Prime Minister Netanyahu at its head, would win 36 seats if the Knesset were to go to elections today. That's 6 more seats than they currently have. And joining me now to discuss these results are Amir Whiteman, the head of the Libertarian Caucus in the Likud, and Binyamin Lashkar from the Likud Central Committee. Thank you both very much for coming in.
Thank you.
So first of all, Binyamin, I'll actually start with you. What are your initial reactions to this poll? And, does it surprise you at all?
Not at all. I think the people see the results of the policy of the government. We have no unemployment, we have growth. We have the best foreign relations we ever had. Israel is in the best situation in all of its history. And that's the first reason why people are very happy with Benjamin Netanyahu. He's a good prime minister. He's the best possible. And people like him because there is nobody who can do what he's doing now.
Well, it's also, you mentioned a lot of kind of favorability, and it's true. We just had a poll about 90% of Israelis reporting themselves as being very happy, but there's also kind of other polls that are suggesting, say, for example, the faith in the two-state solution or in a peace plan is at an all-time low among all parties. So, there are kind of differences here. But, Amir, let's go to you. What are your initial reactions, I suppose?
Well, first of all, I, of course, agree with Benjamin. Mm-hmm. There's no doubt that both the economic and security situation is the best that it has ever been in every single possible way we look at it. And therefore people are, understandably enough content and happy with the situation, with the lot. The country is stable, it's growing. Why should we change anything? In terms of the two-state solution, yes, that's another reason why people are in favor of Netanyahu, because people understand that all those policies that have been promoted by the left for the past however many years, 30, 40 years, have completely failed. And instead of accepting that they were wrong, the leftists carry on insisting on the same old failed policies, and therefore the Israeli public sees that these policies are not viable, and therefore people do not support them, and therefore people go with the alternative, which is the right wing, led by the Likud and Benjamin Netanyahu.
So, okay, again, you're mentioning maybe some other party heads and what the support for them might be. And according to the same poll, 33% by Keshet, 33%, about a third of respondents said that they really don't see another person who could replace viably Prime Minister Netanyahu. Now, do you see that more as support for Netanyahu or fear of the unknown?
Both. First, I think Benjamin Netanyahu is one of the brightest leaders in the world. I think I see almost nobody who is on the level of Benjamin Netanyahu in the world, also in Israel. I mean, there are some good people in politics in Israel, but he's by far above everybody for the moment. When we will have someone better than him, with pleasure, we'll replace him with someone better. But no, he's the best because he's very good and because he's by far above everybody else.
Well, I would like to add, some interesting statistic, because Americans like statistic, right? So some interesting statistic about that. The Facebook page of Benjamin Netanyahu has got well over 2 million likes. Now, his closest competitors is just a few 100,000 likes.
You can buy likes, though.
Well, I'm sure, but either he buys much better than all the others,
sure,
or more likely he doesn't buy them and people simply follow him because he's head and shoulders above pretty much everybody else, as Benjamin said, not only in Israel, but probably in the world. But certainly in Israel, we do not see anybody, being even close, remotely close to his abilities, to his rhetorical abilities, political abilities. As far as I can see, barring some terrible legal issues or whatever, he's here to stay not only in the next elections, but probably even longer than that.
All right, so, again, since we're mentioning other viable options, things like that, Gideon Sa'ar and Yair Lapid, their names came up as maybe the second most popular potential candidates to lead the country. What do you think a country under their leadership would look like, and how likely would that ever be to come to pass?
God forbid. That's what I think most people would say.
God forbid. Gideon Sa'ar is a very competent man. I know personally. I don't think he's ready to be prime minister. We need to see him as a minister a few more years to judge him better and know what his capabilities are. It will not be like with Prime Minister Netanyahu, but he's a capable man. I mean, he's one of the main contenders to replace Netanyahu in many years. There is also Ayelet Shaked from the Beit HaYehudi. There are a few others. We'll see. We have a lot of time. Maybe someone new will come also. It will be, as Amir said, we have many years with Netanyahu still before us, so we have time.
All right, well, so another question, you mentioned Ayelet Shaked, the Justice Minister. She mentioned that kind of like this double-edged sword situation about how if the more popular Likud becomes, the more dangerous it actually is for the country, and that the last time the Likud had over 40 seats, we pulled out of Gaza in 2005. So she's kind of warning that a very powerful Likud will tend to make a coalition with more central or left-wing parties instead of the right-wing parties. Would you agree with that?
Well, first of all, time will tell. What happened in 2003 was not linked to the Likud as a party, but was linked specifically to Ariel Sharon as prime minister. We have to remember that Ariel Sharon went to the Hitnatkut, to the disengagement program, because he was himself entangled in legal problems, serious legal problems, and he kind of tried to find a way out of those problems by going through some sort of a corrupt big program, and he succeeded because the legal establishment essentially went with him and shut down all the legal proceedings against him. But concerning Benjamin Netanyahu, I don't see him, frankly, doing anything remotely close to that. And I don't think there is where to pull out anymore, because we've pulled out already of Gaza. So where are we going to pull out from Jerusalem? I don't think there is anything on the table that is realistic. And Benjamin Netanyahu has shown over the years that he's a very prudent man, that he's very careful. I don't believe he's going to go for for any radical program. So I don't see anything like that coming.
And you don't see, again, with this poll mentioning that some of the religious parties, United Toward Judaism, Shas, etc., Beit HaYehudi, they lost seats in this poll. How do you reflect on that? What does that say to you about maybe some of the policies that have been enacted in the last few months?
First, it's a poll, and we know that polls are not really reliable. We need to see the real results. Usually, Shas, for example, does better in reality than in the polls. We'll see. I think Shas in particular is going down because under the leadership of Aryeh Deri, it's not the same party. It became Aryeh Deri is a corrupt man.
He came out of prison for corruption and then resumed his position.
He's a left-winger. Is not in phase with his own electorate, and I think this party has no reason to exist. In fact, and I hope in the future it will disappear.
All right. Well, I guess we'll have to take that as the end, saying that it is a poll, and we have to take all the results with a grain of salt. And we'll see how it actually ends up in elections. I think in 2019. And,
yes.
Yeah. All right, Benjamin, Emil, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much.
Now, following the eruption of riots along the Gaza border fence on Tuesday, Israel has again closed down the Erez border crossing into the northern Gaza Strip. Hundreds of Gaza residents threw rocks and severely damaged the fence, only to be dispersed by tear gas and some live fire. The health ministry in Gaza reported that several Palestinians were wounded, but now, with the exception of allowing humanitarian aid, the crossing will remain closed until repairs can be completed. This is far from the first time the Erez crossing has been closed, but it's relatively rare, as protests of this kind are also rare at Erez. This incident also comes just days after other attempted infiltrations took place, as well as while Israel and Hamas are reportedly engaged in long-term truce negotiations. Brokered by Egypt and the United Nations, Israel and Hamas have been discussing terms that would include opening up the maritime border around Gaza, potentially building a new port, easing restrictions around the Strip's land crossings, and more. In return, Hamas would stop firing rockets into the Strip. Palestinian Authority President Abbas has made it adamantly clear, however, that he opposes the indirect talks as they don't include the PA, thus making it more difficult for the Ramallah government to resume control over all Palestinian territories. But indeed, Israel and the PA haven't held any serious talks since 2014, and Hamas has been operating separately from the Palestinian Authority since the terror group seized power in Gaza in 2007. Hamas is also polling much higher than Abbas's Fatah party among the West Bank and Gaza voters. Now back in Israel, despite Hamas being a terror group, the majority of Israelis also reportedly support peace negotiations with Hamas. According to a survey released Wednesday, over 57% of Israeli Jews and 60% of Israeli Arabs across all political factions supported negotiating with Hamas. Among the Jews, however, roughly 80% also expressed that they would reject any deal that did not include the return of the remains of two Israeli soldiers, Oron Shaul and Hadar Golden. They've been held by Hamas since 2014. The question did not ask, however, about Hisham al-Saed and Avraham Mengistu, two supposedly mentally ill Israeli citizens who reportedly wandered into Israel on their own several years ago. Only a few months after Paraguay inaugurated its new embassy in Jerusalem following Trump's decision to move the United States embassy, the Latin American country has now announced that they are moving it back to Tel Aviv. This decision, made by Paraguay's new administration led by Mario Abdo Benitez, puts the historic relationship between the two countries on the line. TV's Latin American correspondent Joy Gavijon is here to tell us more about this controversial decision. So, Joy, why the reversal? I understand that the new elected president belongs to the same party as Horacio Cartes.
Thanks, Aaron. So you're right. Horacio Cartes, the former president of Paraguay, and Mario Abdo Benitez, the new president, they both belong to the Colorado party. But because Cartes wasn't eligible for a new mandate, his co-party members Benitez ended up winning the elections back in April. Now here comes the problem, because Paraguay moved its embassy in May, a decision made by Cartes in his final months of mandate without consulting Benitez, who had already been elected by then.
I see. All right. So, now that Benitez took office, he's backing out because he didn't support it in the first place, I guess. So, but still, why wouldn't he stand by Cartes' decision and keep the ties with Israel?
Well, that's actually a very good question, Aaron, because we're talking about years and years of strong ties between the two countries that are now at risk. Remember that in the opening ceremony for the Paraguayan embassy in Jerusalem, Netanyahu praised the move and thanked Cartes for being a true friend to Israel. And he even mentioned the fact that Paraguay helped Jews escape Nazis in Germany.
Right. Not to mention that Paraguay was one of the few countries that supported the establishment of the State of Israel. They were the deciding vote, actually, in the first place, by recognizing us at the UN, something that Netanyahu highlighted at that event.
Exactly. So now the government of Paraguay issued a statement where they say that the country has always supported a two-state solution and that the conflict over the status of Jerusalem is something that has to be addressed through negotiations between the concerned parties. But it finishes saying that they are committed to contribute to peace in the Middle East and that the Republic of Paraguay, quote, reaffirms its willingness to maintain excellent ties of friendship and cooperation with the states of Israel and Palestine.
All right, so I suppose that means not angering the Palestinians is basically what they're getting at.
Right.
But this doesn't seem to be so much on Israel's side, because the prime minister, didn't take the news so lightly here in Israel. He tweeted that he had instructed to close the Israeli embassy in Paraguay, and that the unusual decision by Paraguay to relocate the embassy again will cast a shadow over relations between the countries.
Which is something that it's actually being celebrated and praised by the Palestinian Authority. The PA claimed some responsibility for the decision and announced that now they will immediately open an embassy in Paraguay.
All right, well, we'll definitely have to follow this closely and
Yes.
see what the consequences will be, from this move. Thanks for the update, Joy.
Thank you.
After 15 years of fighting for her life, 4 of which were spent in a coma, 15-year-old Israeli Noah Haibi has passed away. Noah's death makes her the 4th child to die now in relation to the Remedia formula affair of 2003, and nearly 30 others were reported gravely injured. The deaths began over a decade ago when dozens of infants started flooding into hospital rooms suffering from cardiac and neurological symptoms. As it turns out, the children in question had all fallen victim to a bad batch of Israeli non-dairy formula sold by Israeli brand Remedia between July and November of 2003. The batch of formula was completely lacking in vitamin B1 or thiamine, a vitamin that is critical for the development of a healthy nervous system. When doctors realized what the issue was, they immediately prescribed thiamine supplements, and some children recovered. But 3 infants died, and over 20 infants were left with severe disabilities, like Noah Haibi. After investigations concluded, Remedia's chief food technologist was sentenced in 2013 to 30 months in prison for negligent manslaughter. CEO Gideon Landsberger and former owner Moshe Miller were exonerated, however. As for Noah Haibi and her family, they've led the past 15 years of their lives through machines, hope, and force of will.
אנחנו לא ויתרנו, אף פעם לא הרמנו ידיים. תמיד הייתי איתה ברגעים הקשים, ולצערי הפעם האחרונה, שזה אתמול, עד שסוף סוף החלטתי לצאת לנופש, אף פעם לא יצאתי, פחדתי לצאת, אמרתי אם יקרה, ידעתי שיכול לקרות, אמרתי אם יקרה, אז אני רוצה להיות לידה. ולצערי פשוט חיכתה שאני אסע, נסעתי בבוקר, דיברתי איתה, התקשרתי אליה בוואטסאפ, שמנו לה אוזנייה, אני כמעט בטוחה שהיא תמיד שמעה אותי, כי כל הזמן שרנו לה שירים וסיפרנו לה סיפורים ודיברנו איתה ולא ויתרנו, גם כשהייתה בתרדמת, אמרתי גם אם יש 1% שהיא שומעת, אנחנו מדברים איתה ועושים הכל. ודיברתי איתה בבוקר בוואטסאפ, במצלמה, ואמרתי לה, נועה, כמה את יפה וכמה את חמודה ונהדרת, ואמא אוהבת אותך, ואם את חוזרת ביום שישי ואת מרגישה טוב, הכל בסדר. והיא פשוט פעם ראשונה ב4 שנים שהייתה בתרדמת, התחילה להזיז את השפתיים. היא ממש הזיזה את השפתיים, ואני אומרת, מה נועה? מה? אני שואלת את המטפלת שלי, העובדת זרה שהייתה לידה, את מריאן שלנו, הנשמה שבלעדיה אני אומרת לה, מה קורה? היא אומרת לי, אני לא יודעת, נועה מזיזה את השפתיים, כאילו שהיא רוצה לדבר. אני אומרת לה, נועה, מה את רוצה להגיד לי? נועה, את מדברת איתי, מה את רוצה להגיד לי? וזהו, חצי שעה אחרי היא נפטרה.
Professor Fatal Valevsky, the director of the Pediatric Neurology Unit at Tel Aviv Soraski Medical Center, was the one who tracked the development of the nearly 40 child victims of the Remedia affair, saying that unlike other vitamins like B12, B1 is only stored for a few weeks in the body, so it needs to be replenished often. Quote, "It's critical to be aware of how important this vitamin is for child development," end quote, adding that even healthy babies might be at risk from B1 deficiency. If your infant is suffering from virus to virus, quote, "you must intervene with extra vitamins," and it's a vicious cycle because one of the first symptoms of lack of B1 in the system is an absence of appetite, end quote. Fatal Valevsky concluded that the goal now was to prevent this from ever happening again, and that proper infant feeding and regulatory control over breast milk substitutes is sorely needed. A joint Israeli-American research team has just cracked a new breakthrough technology that could save countless lives. The team has perfected a new software algorithm that can predict blood pressure irregularities in patients who are in intensive care, which, as we know, can often be a fatal trigger when doctors are trying to save patients who are in critical condition. When things come down to the wire, a patient's life can be thrown into chaos with something as simple as a small fluctuation in blood pressure. This minor complication can explode into a life-threatening situation very quickly. The problem is that it's been nearly impossible to predict irregularities like this ahead of time, especially in patients whose vital signs are already distressed. But that's where the joint effort comes in. A team of researchers from Israel's Ben-Gurion University and Hadassah Medical Center put their heads together with minds from the Cincinnati Children's Hospital, and the results are truly amazing. Their new software can apparently predict a slew of blood pressure-related instabilities in patients hours before those fluctuations actually manifest. With this kind of information ahead of time, doctors can prevent when or even if a patient might have hemorrhagic shock and intervene accordingly. Predicting and preventing complications like these would potentially simplify emergency procedures for countless patients all over the globe. And this technology, called Vital Minor, is the first of many expected breakthroughs to come from this joint US-Israeli venture. If the rest is as promising as this, I'd say the collaboration has more than paid off. All right, now speaking of architecture, whenever any new development or renovation is to take place, the Israeli Antiquities Authority typically needs to be involved. And maybe surprisingly, that doesn't mean just on land. Underwater archaeologists working together with the IAA have been scouring the seabed off of Israel's Mediterranean coast near the site of where the Leviathan gas field is due to be built. Workers are attempting not only to preserve any relic that may be buried beneath the sea floor, but they're also protecting evidence of the 5,000-year-old port which once stood at the same location. And with the pending gas field's inherent environmental toxicity, time is of the essence.
We work very closely with the Antiquities Authority here in Israel to make sure that should we discover such finds, we first of all avoid causing harm to those areas, and secondly to make sure that they are aware of the resources and potential finds that they have.
We have so many treasures and old shipwrecks and things like that. We should get them out of the water before we can't enter the water anymore.
And Noble Energy, which owns the Leviathan field, has been very helpful in the preservation efforts as well.
למעשה מרגע שהחל שיתוף הפעולה עם חברת נובל אנרג'י, כמעט ולא היו מגבלות. החומרים הועברו אלינו, כמובן תוך שמירה על סודיות. האתרים שנבחנו ברובם על ידי, במימון נובל אנרג'י, כולל יציאה לים עם ספינת מחקר מאוד גדולה לביצוע ולהוצאה של חפצים עתיקים שהיו בתוואי, ואפשר לומר שלא נחסך שקל או דולר אחד בנושא. שיתוף פעולה שהוא למעשה היה חסר תקדים מבחינתנו לשמירה על העתיקות ועל נכסי התרבות של מדינת ישראל.
But indeed, archaeology isn't the only thing at risk with the new pipeline. Just last week, thousands of Israelis gathered in Tel Aviv's Rabin Square to protest against the pipeline's planned location. Noble Energy's regional vice president said the project will be safe and will replace less healthy fossil fuels. But critics argue that the planned petroleum location is unnecessarily far too close to the shoreline for comfort. A spill at any point in the future would be cataclysmic, both for archaeological study as well as for the environment. Only time will tell who is right. Visitors and locals alike in New York were greeted with an unusual sight this week, a 6-meter or 20-foot tall Statue of Liberty drowning in plastic. The installation, put together by Israeli beverage company Sodastream and the Oceanic Society, was installed in Manhattan's Flatiron Plaza over the past few days, and it was meant to bring awareness towards the abuse of single-use plastics. Passerbys who caught a glimpse of drowning Liberty, as it's called, were also met with a cup of refreshing sparkling water, and were of course also asked to sign a pledge to use more reusable bottles. In a statement, Sodastream CEO Daniel Birnbaum explained that less plastic made is less plastic wasted. And that, quote, "We have no choice. We have to go reusable. Annual plastic production is skyrocketing, and the United States is one of the biggest polluters in the world," end quote. Entourage actor Adrien Grenier was also one of the many who came and signed the pledge. Now, of course, part of the campaign is to sell more Sodastream bottles and seltzer water making units, but the point is no less true, and a 20-foot tall Statue of Liberty standing up to her chest in plastic is a particularly poignant image. One woman from Russia said she was reminded about bad consumer habits that she'd observed in America. Another man said that he was reminded not to litter as well. And we can only hope that the message will spread as fast as possible. Now for our Hebrew word of the day, a temporary installation in New York is again drawing attention to our wastefulness. Well, being aware in many ways is a very important thing, so today's word is muda, meaning aware. You need to be muda, or aware of your rights when you speak to authority figures. You need to be muda of the destructive habits like using things once and throwing them away. And we even need to be mudaim, or aware, when simply crossing the street. Now, if you're having trouble, one way to gain better awareness, or muda'ut, is to simply take out the earbuds, take some deep breaths, look around, take things slow. Much of life is more enjoyable that way. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. The whole weekend is expected to be clear to partly cloudy, with little changes in temperatures. Tonight will be fairly warm with a low of 77 or 25 degrees Celsius. Then over the weekend, you can expect highs of around 86 or 30 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.59 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Israel English News and on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Aaron Porras. Thank you for watching.